So the small intestine is the next component of our alimentary canal after the stomach. So it extends from the pyloric valve to what is called the ileocecal valve. It is small because of the small diameter, but it is actually longer with much greater surface than the large intestine. So we have a smaller diameter compared to larger, or the large intestine, but it is longer. So I'll put but longer in comparison. Okay, so the small intestine actually has 3 parts. The first part, which is a relatively short section, but which is super important, is called the duodenum. And then we have the jejunum. And then we have the ileum. Oops. So let's look at the structure here. So if I'm looking at my abdomen, and this shows the cadaver view as well, we can see that here is the stomach, right? It is actually going to connect to the small intestine right here. So this is actually the small intestine. It sits more central than the large intestine, which begins right here, goes ascending, transverse, and then descending, and then you have the anus. So all of this in here is actually small intestine. And remember that we have associated with our digestive tract and our intestines and our stomach, these mesenteries. And so you can see the mesenteries here in the cadaver that is holding and providing pathways for nerves, lymphatic vessels, and circulatory vessels to the individual structures of the intestines. So here we can see the small intestine in color. So here is my pyloric valve. This is my first part, which is called the duodenum. And then we have the jejunum, and then we have the ileum. The ileum is going to connect to the cecum via what is nicely and aptly named the ileocecal valve. So let's talk about the duodenum first. Sometimes you hear this pronounced as duodenum, right? So this is the first part of the small intestine. So it receives the acidic chyme from the stomach as it moves through the pyloric valve. So what we need is we need to neutralize the chyme in the duodenum. So there's mechanisms to neutralize. So mainly this has to do with releasing bicarbonate ions. So we have HCO3, and that's a negative. And what that is going to do is this is going to bind to hydrogen ions. It picks them up and it binds them. So this is my bicarbonate ion right here, but it is going to remove hydrogen ions from solution. So it is going to turn this acidic chyme more alkaline. And that is really important for the next step, which has to do with the pancreas. So if we look at the duodenum, we have the pancreas as well as the liver contributing substances to this part of the digestive tract. So let me see if I can find that image here. image right here. Okay, so here's my duodenum. It is going to receive bile that is produced by the liver. We're going to talk about the liver and the function of bile later. And it is also going to produce, you'll notice that there's ducts coming in from the pancreas. The pancreas is a very strange organ. It's actually hard to find because it sits within the mesentery and it is very diffuse. It's not really well defined. And so this is the digestive gland that is going to produce enzymes that are going to be released into the duodenum. So the duodenum connects to the liver, receiving bile, as well as to the pancreas, receiving digestive enzymes. So let's look at the structure of the small intestine in general. The major function of the small intestine, not just the duodenum. So maybe the major function of most of the small intestine is twofold. We have chemical digestion. So we have pancreatic enzymes. The second part is nutrient absorption. So this is very problematic because we need an epithelial tissue that is going to allow certain things through, but not allow other things. So we need to absorb stuff. Sometimes we end up absorbing toxins, and then that actually goes to the liver for it to be detoxified. So this nutrient absorption is super important. So what is unique about the small intestine that allows for nutrient absorption? This means that it must have a very large surface area. And so if we look at the histology of the small intestine, we can see how it increases its surface area. So the histology would be this, okay? So just like the rest of the alimentary canal, it has those 4 layers. So it has the mucosa, right? Let me plug my iPad in. And it has the submucosa, and it has the muscularis externi and the serous or the serosa layer. So if we look at this, you can see that it has folds. So we can write that there's folds. Okay, there's folds in that increase the surface area. And then we have villi on those folds. So a villus finger. And then we have microvilli. So very small cytoplasmic extensions called microvilli. All of these act to increase the surface area. So it's kind of like we have these folds here. And then if I were to look at this larger, it might be folds upon folds, right? And then if I were to look at one of these villi fingers, I would notice that there is microvilli. So let's look at what this looks like. So this is my fold. And then notice that these are the villi, these little villus fingers, right, upon the fold. And then if we look at the individual villi here, we see that it is simple columnar epithelial tissue, so layers of column-shaped cells. And we can see that there are goblet cells. Let me use my little pointer here. Goblet cells here. What do? They produce mucus. So again, this is mucous membrane is protecting the lining of our small intestine. Each one of these villi have a lymphatic vessel, lymphatics usually in green, and capillaries. So this is how nutrients are going to move across and be picked up. And so we're going to talk about the nutrients and their method of being absorbed and transported in another video. But if we look at the individual cells on, these are the column-shaped cells. We can see that this is what is the microvilli. And this has another name, which you might want to write down next to the microvilli, which is called the brush border. And so there are some enzymes that are actually embedded as proteins in this brush border, which also increases the surface area over which we can digest and absorb. So supposedly, if you took the small intestine and you laid it out and like got rid of all of the folds, all of the villi and all of the microvilli, the surface area would be about the size of a tennis court. So it's a huge surface area over which nutrients can be very efficiently absorbed. Okay,